Well, good morning.
Good morning, Glenn.
Everyone, welcome to Blabbit. Every once in a while, it's always good to have a slight curveball. It seems like our guest is running a moment or two late. So I guess we'll have to fill in for a little bit. What's new in the life of Paul Geiger?
Oh, you always ask the most loaded questions, Glenn. What's new in the life of Paul Geiger? Well, we are, or I am, along with a bunch of other coaches and whatnot, we're going to be putting on a talent summit that is starting in December. It's going to replay again in January, or regroup again in January, and then do it again in June. So
Nice.
it's all content experts in their various fields. So I definitely niche down, or as some people say, nerd down, and just really my topic is dealing with the fear and being more clear, which is no surprise to you, my friend, as you've heard me say those words many times on various episodes of Blabbit. So I am going to be talking to a large group. This is a bunch of organizations that have all they have multiple eyes on this right now, so that members of their organization can be on the same page in regard to conflict conversations, management skills, public speaking, various topics. So that's been interesting to put together. I'm not spearheading it, but I am participating and contributing. How about you?
Well, just enjoying getting ready for this holiday season, trying to keep my head above water as we've been busier than one-arm paper hangers. So just enjoying life and spreading information. It's been a kind of a trying time, if you would, for our good old attorneys filing lawsuits against people. And so we've been doing a lot of counseling, consulting, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think that your summit sounds very interesting because we all have inefficiencies. We all have places that we could be stronger. So the more experts we could listen to, learn from, we can all get a little bit better and have a better 2022.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what's really interesting is it takes place over a couple of days in each of those weeks. I think it's the first week in December, maybe the second week in January, first or second week in June. The Talent Summit, it's very, very affordable in terms of getting a block, getting a group, and it'll be similar content on all three of those dates, but it's not exclusive to only a certain number of people. In other words, if you decide you want 50 people to see it this time, a different 50 people can see it the next time, and another 50. So it suddenly becomes extremely um, valuable
Mhm.
and and worthwhile.
Oh, it's good for large organizations as well. That way, everybody is not out of work, ignoring what they should be doing for that period of time. They can segment it up into different groups.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I like the idea, especially when it comes to communication skills, of people being aware of what those skills are and what some of the tips, what some of the approaches, some of the techniques and tactics you can use to just foster a more positive workplace.
Hmm.
So a lot of this has to do with being able to overcome some of those fears that we've talked about with our coaches here on Blabbit. We all we all experience a little bit of that, what we call running to ego safety when
Hmm.
we're in difficult conversations, or when we're not sure of somebody's intentions, or when we assume that we actually know what somebody's intentions are. That can lead to a lot of miscommunication as well.
Well, and in my experience, and I'm sure it's yours as well, communication is always probably the biggest downfall to when things aren't doing properly or aren't going in the right direction with an organization. How much do you encounter? Because I've heard about this a lot this year, maybe the last 2 years more than I ever did before, imposter syndrome. with people not having the confidence or thinking people are going to see through them, afraid that people are going to look at them and think they're answering the question properly. How much are you seeing people deal with that in the last couple of years?
Well, I see people dealing with that quite a bit when it comes to my line of work, because as a public speaking coach, very often when you find yourself in the spotlight, it's because there you have declared or somebody else has declared that you're an expert. And then comes the sense of having to prove it all over again, when
Mhm.
really you being in that position is an indication, is affirmation that you are the expert that you say you are.
Nice.
So yeah, it doesn't require that you it requires that you understand the way that people communicate.
Mhm.
And that is, regardless if somebody is extremely intelligent or extremely experienced, even if they're not, you still, because of listening behaviors, you want to approach them in the same way.
Excellent. And you know what? As we're doing all those things, being a little more organized would probably be a good thing. So why don't we welcome in our lovely guest, Pamela, and see what types of tips she can give us about organization today.
Yay, Pamela is here. Good to see you, Pamela.
Hi, how are you?
Doing very well. Are you still traveling? Are you still traveling abroad?
Yeah, I'm still in Spain, and I think I mentioned I'm in Spain. I work from I work with lawyers. I work using my computer, and my lovely Mac crashed yesterday.
Yikes.
Oh my
I heard
goodness.
about that. I did, and I was
And
wondering, I
yeah,
figured you were too frazzled at that point for me to even question whether you'd be here or not. And I really didn't tell Glenn that you were number one in Spain and number two that you had indicated on social media that your computer had crashed. I just had faith in you, Pamela.
yeah,
And he always likes to see how I can improv and act on the run.
I do. I do. I love the fact that we're able to just riff and go and just
right,
and do whatever it is that we need to do. But I know you're the same way, Pamela, correct?
absolutely. So it's like, okay, I'm in Spain. My computer crashed. All right, how are we going to do this? I still have to talk to my clients. I'm still going to be on this podcast. The show must go on.
Hmm.
Okay. Well,
Fantastic.
why don't we reset real quick just to welcome everyone to Blabbit? As for those of you who have been watching, Paul and I were just having a conversation while we had some temporary technical difficulties with Pamela. So, welcome to Blabbit. My name is Glenn Ingram. I've been working in teaching, coaching, and helping people become better listeners and better influencers so that they can sell more products for the better part of the last 2 decades, unbelievably. I know I look 15, but still. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing well, Glenn. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you here. If you're tuning in for the first time, my name is Paul Geiger. I'm the other co host of Blabbit, and I'm a public speaking coach and a presentation expert. And I help people be very clear about their messages and also give themselves permission to tell the stories that really define them, which goes a long way to connecting with people, both with networking, also on job interviews and interactions in the workplace. Pamela, give everybody a quick bio on you.
Okay, my name is Pamela DeNeuve. For the past 25 plus years, I've worked specifically with lawyers. I help lawyers to organize, become more productive, and manage their stress while handling difficult, challenging, and demanding law practices.
Excellent. Excellent. I know personally when we talk about organizational skills that I've have challenges of my own that I work through on a continual basis. I know I've talked to other people that have the same types of things. A lot of times when we're doing everything, we're really not getting anything accomplished. So, when dealing with these busy professionals that may have an ego or two, what's the first steps that you would go through to talk to them to identify organizational issues? And then some things, maybe a quick tip or two to help them get started down the right path.
Well, it's really important, when you talk about lawyers and any professional or anyone that's probably over 16, people feel like they know it all and they feel like they can do it on themselves. They do it themselves. And the people who come to me, I wasn't the first house on the block that they came to. Usually they try other things, they try to do it themselves, or they just have suffered silently, in many cases for decades. And so when they come to me, they finally are at the last house on the block and they're saying, I need help. I've tried to do this on my own. I have done all these different things. I've stood on my head. It's maybe lasted a little while. I've paid all this money to get myself organized, and yet I'm still at square one. So it's very simple. It's not rocket science, which is, again, when you have people who are highly educated, like attorneys and lawyers, solicitors, they feel like it should be this really complicated set of rules or steps in order to get organized. So the first place I start is how do you begin your day? How we begin our day defines the rest of our day. How we start our Monday can determine the rest of our week. And how we start the first day of the month can determine how the rest of the month is going to go. And how that first month of the year goes can determine how the rest of the year goes. So it's all in the beginning. It's like, I don't know if either of you have been in San Francisco, but if you're in San Francisco and if you have a car and if it's at the top of the hill, because the hills are very steep, and if you let the brake up, but if you are able to stop the car, you can actually stand in front of the car. If it just moves, a few inches, and you can stop the car. But once that car starts rolling down the hill, you better get out of the way, because it's not going to stop, and no one's going to stop it until it crashes at the bottom of the hill. So organization is much the same way. If you don't get ahead of the organization, then it gets so far out of control and so much overwhelming that it's almost impossible to stop that momentum of chaos and overwhelm and deadlines. There's no way to stop it. So therefore, I really, really am very basic. Okay, how are we going to start your morning? And really, the morning is too late. You've got to hit that puppy the night before.
So it's kind of like you're the chief.
The night before, you organize what you're going to do. This is what I have my clients do. What are you going to do tomorrow before you leave the office? Because if you go into the office and you're now going to organize your day, the phone is ringing, you've got emails, you have whatever, the day has gotten away from you, and you never get to even sit down to make your list of what you're going to do for the day. So therefore, the night before is when you start to organize your day.
So it sounds a little bit like you're the head counselor at AA, Attorneys Anonymous. At first, they have to admit they have a problem.
Well, I mean, that's a way of thinking of it. But the truth is that whether it's attorneys or anyone else, if we don't get ahead, you have to stay ahead of it. If you don't stay ahead of it, it's very hard to get in front of it after it's behind. I often tell my clients, I say, it's like if you have you're riding a horse. If you're on top of the horse, if you stay on top of the horse, you have control about the horse. However, if you fall off the horse and now you're trying to get on the horse is going to, drag you this way and that way, and you're trying to get on that horse, and it's nearly impossible to get back on that horse because you didn't get on the horse in the first place.
Okay, so number one, I'm afraid to go back to San Francisco, and number two, I'm not getting back on a horse. I love those analogies, though, Pamela.
Those a good analogy,
but I understand exactly what you're talking about, because who does not have the impulse, just the natural impulse at the end of a really difficult day or a very busy day, to just want to say, that's it. So it
Mhm.
becomes a real discipline
It
to
is.
be able to say, well, wait, this was a strenuous day, or it was a busy day, a very work-loaded day, but I need to do myself the favor of figuring out what I'm going to do, at least the first couple of steps. Would that include, do you advise, as they say, eating the frogs first in the morning?
I do. I do. I do. So, one of the things that works for my clients is that I hold them accountable.
Hmm.
They really actually tell me what they're going to do. Okay, what are the top 5 things you're going to do tomorrow? Or what are the top things you're going to do this week? And then looking at what are the first, when you first get into the office, what is the most difficult thing to do? And in many cases, that is client development. It is going out there and trying to do some rainmaking. And if you think that you're going to get your day going and then you're going to, oh, it's 1 o'clock, I better do some rainmaking, it rarely happens. So if you have that as a discipline first thing in the morning, is that I'm going to, and it's not a big deal. What is most important is the consistency. So if you come in the office first thing, and one for many, eating the frog, or the first thing that's maybe most difficult for attorneys and lawyers alike, is to do those steps of reaching out, communicating with people, and doing the rainmaking.
Well, Glenn, that's what you do all day long. You eat the frogs all day long
I love
because you're.
frogs. They taste like chicken. One thing that came to mind when you're talking about that is it identifying a little bit about your innate, I'm going to say, inner schedule. And I say that because I am the person that starts off the day and my productivity wanes as the day goes on.
Mhm.
My better half hates mornings and eases into her day, and her productivity escalates as the day goes on. So do we have to identify some of those inner traits of ourselves and find out how to A, enhance them, and B, maybe correct some of them, or find ways to be more productive throughout the day?
Well, we all have body clocks, and we
Mhm.
do have to acknowledge what our body clocks are. A lot of people are not morning people. A lot of my clients are not morning people, and they may be night owls. However, with that said, when you work in the legal profession, it is a morning oriented profession. Court is in the morning. You have to if you work for a firm, you have to get in there early in the morning. You know, we literally have to help. I literally have to help some of my clients rewire their brains, because how that works for getting into the office late has been just excruciatingly painful. So you really have to, in many cases, although, if you know that your peak, say for example, is like 1 o'clock, maybe that's when you'll eat your frogs. Maybe, but you still, when you're in a profession like the legal profession, it's very, very unusual if they can rewrite how their practice was run based on, I'm not a morning person, because a
Mhm.
lot of stuff happens in the morning. And so a lot of it is rewiring my client's brain into the pain they feel when they don't start their day early is far more disadvantageous to them than for them to eat their frog, which is getting up and get it going in the morning. That's their frog.
Mhm. Now, when you talk about stress and reducing stress, I know that there can often be a perception that stress is something that is to the point of anxiety, to the point of breakdown.
Mhm.
But aren't there little drips that lead to stress? I mean, the feeling is, well, I'm stressed out, but there are little steps along the way. Are there things that we should look out for besides just being organized, but I guess stressors that we may not be aware of that you see very often?
Okay, well, let's just start off with defining stress, anxiety, and depression. So, stress is outside. It's something that there are stimulants outside of us that are real that cause us to be stressed out. That means that our body chemicals, we're in fight or flight mode because of deadlines, because of demanding career, demanding clients, deadlines, overload, work overload. That is stressful. Now, we'll park stress. The next thing is anxiety. Anxiety is what happens inside of us that occurs based on our perception of what's going on outside. So we become anxious. We become our body. Our bodies are in fight or flight mode. We're getting a lot of cortisol in our body. We're getting a lot of adrenaline, and that's anxiety. And if we're not careful, if we have chronic stress, now that leads to chronic, and we're reacting to the stress in an adverse way. That means we now have chronic anxiety, which is that we're constantly having racing hearts, and we're having high blood pressure and heart palpitation and chronic indigestion and fatigue, and all of those things are the internal workings based on stress. Now, if you continue to have chronic stress leading to chronic anxiety, then that can lead to chronic depression, which is hopelessness, listlessness, wondering why go on. It's too much to go on. And so the depression is the mental state that leads. I mean, there are other factors that cause depression. Some people are born, they're chemically imbalanced and they have depression. But when we're talking specifically as it relates to stress, this usually happens as a result of the chronic stress leading to the depression. I mean, the anxiety, which then leads to the depression. Now, what can make all of that even more involved is it could lead to PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And a lot of my clients come to me and they have PTSD. And the PTSD can be something that even happened as a child, that because of the chronic stress or the situations that they're in today triggers past feelings of hopelessness and overwhelm or whatever one experienced as a child. So now the PTSD also can lead to the depression. So a lot of what I do when I work with my clients with regard to the stress is reframing. Okay, we have to reframe what's going on out here, outside of you. It's just like, if I use bad example, but if there was a lion tamer, and what they did was they tamed lions, that was their career, and these are big, scary lions. If you manage or you carry that, okay, this is my job, I deal with lions, and I'm going to go in here and here's the formula, and then I'm not going to allow that stressful situation, that this is my job, to now have me have sleepless nights and all of these feelings inside that now is leading, now I got to go do the lions again, that sort of thing, which now leads to a whole bunch of other stuff. So the nature, when lawyers practice law, the nature of law is taming lions. It's being in the arena. And so now let's look at how we can reframe what's going on so that it does not lead to chronic anxiety and depression.
One of our listeners just wanted to know if you were following him around because he said it was insightful.
Yeah, I do. A lot of lawyers say that, or professionals say that. I do work with some professionals as well, but they do say, you're like right inside my head. You're right inside my head. You're talking exactly about this is my life.
It's interesting you're talking about that. I just read a book here a few months ago. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's a little bit about the animal instinct versus the human instinct, because it's if you're an animal and a lion chasing a zebra, if the zebra lives, it goes on with whatever it's going to go, and it doesn't think backwards about what happened. And don't you find it quite often that most of us are our own worst enemies, and we create and perpetuate more problems than there are because of our worries, whether we're stressing and thinking backwards or anxiety and thinking forwards. So when you're talking to these people to help them get more organized, is a little bit of counseling to say, you know what, you can only control what you can control. Learn to get rid of ideas that are going to affect your organization so that you can stay on task.
Well, this cannot be minimized. These emotions, these feelings, and these situations that are happening in the legal profession cannot be minimized. They have done studies that up to 28% of lawyers suffer from stress or anxiety. That means if you have 100 lawyers standing there, 28 would stand up and come into the front and say, I'm depressed, or I'm stressed, or I have anxiety.
And a bunch of the other ones are just ignoring it.
11 out of every 100, 11%, have stated that they have had suicidal ideations. So now let's look at that. If you said 11 out of 100, let's take 500 lawyers. That's 55 human beings. So, when a lawyer comes to me and they're having these problems, I can't say, oh, okay, here's the formula, do this and do that. That's why there's so many courses. People take these courses and they're wondering why their life still sucks, because they're taking it as a generalization of, oh, well, you're a human and you're not a zebra. This is what zebras do. Why don't you do like zebras? Well, that's not how humans are made up. So humans have, we have backgrounds. When I have a client, when a client comes to me, I don't look at what's going on now. I want to know how they were made up. So my clients come to me and I want to know about the first house they lived in before the age of 7. We draw that house. I want to know what makes you tick. What was your survival? What did you have to survive? What is going on inside of you that has you in PTSD over here because of this work environment? Were you abused? Were you neglected? Were you abandoned? What are the things that happened? Were you put on a pedestal? Were the demands on you too high? And then we can look at, now let's get in the lab. Now you and I can get in the lab and say, okay, this is what happened then. These were the coping skills you developed. Science tells us that our major coping skills were developed before we were 7 years old. And they're subconscious. 90% of what operates our human brain is subconscious. So people don't even know why they're acting that way. Why, how could I say, oh, do this and do this when they don't even know, and I don't know why they're reacting this way? Mm-hmm. Were they bullied? Do they have a boss that's a bully that's bringing up PTSD? Why are you depressed? So once we can find out what is the cause, why are you reacting this particular way, then we can go to the drawing board and say, okay, now let's see how we can correct the situation for you. It's just like if someone is going around and they have one leg that's shorter than the other leg, and they're wondering why they can't run like everyone else, or why their hip hurts, or why their back is out of joint. It's a subconscious thing that's happening, but they don't know it. But once you can say, oh, you know what? Here, let's go to the past. What's your body like? Let's check that. Oh, one of your legs is shorter than the other. Let's get a lift in your shoe, or let's get some physical therapy or something like that. Then you could actually deal with the problem. So therefore, that's what makes my work. That's why I'm the last house on the block. Because when people come to me, they have to be ready to look at their past, to see how their past is affecting their present. So then we can roll up our sleeves, and it's not a one size fits all. It's very specific. Now let's see, what is the formula that will help you to overcome being a lion tamer? Does that make sense to you?
Hmm. So I know that you've been doing this for, is it 25 plus years
Yes,
with
I have.
lawyers now,
Mhm.
Pamela? How did you get started with that? Let's just talk about that for a second, because it's very interesting. You're very passionate about what you do, and you've been doing it for a long time. I'm sure with the same level of passion. Is it, do you have lawyers in your family? Did you see it firsthand? Was it something that you started out with one intention and went into a different direction? What's your background?
Okay. So in 1987, I was living very stressful. My husband and I divorced when my children were very young, so I was a single parent. And anyway, due to the stress, I was struck totally deaf in one of my ears, like in my right ear. I still have tinnitus in that ear, so I couldn't hear. I couldn't walk. I had, I had to completely learn all of this over again. And so out of that, what happened is, you know how you lose one thing and then but you gain something else. So I gained an insight that I could speak with a person, we could walk through their first house, or I could talk to them, and I could literally hear what they could not hear for themselves. So I could
Mhm.
hear that. And so I kind of just did that. I would find people and I would did that. Now once I got the training and I got into coaching, I was in California at the time, not San Francisco, LA. And oh, cute puppy. I'm missing mine. I'm in Spain and my dogs are in Florida. But anyway, um, I opened my coaching practice on Wilshire Boulevard in Santa Monica, and lo and behold, lawyers started coming to me. I don't know how they started coming to me, but they started coming to me, and they kept coming to me, and they kept sending their colleagues to me, and they would even pay for a colleague's anniversary gift for them to come to see me, and so it just kept on. So that was in 1992, and at that time, I did not really was not aware of what was going on in the legal community or the depression or whatever. And it wasn't even talked about then. But I just worked with lawyers, and as years gone on, I know everything. And I know about when they have to do depots, how to prep court. They talk to me about going to court, being paralyzed. I know everything backwards and forwards about what lawyers go through. And I'm not a lawyer, and I know more about their practice, and I'm objective. Like
Mhm.
one of my clients came to me and said, I got this client and they're doing this, this, and this. And then I can objectively say, well, they're doing this, they're being a bully, and we need to do this and say this. So I'm a very objective coach who knows the legal profession, knows the nature of practicing law, knows my clients well, know what they face. And so therefore, voila, that you've got Pamela DeNeuve, in Spain, still coaching my lawyer clients, all over the world.
Right. Well, you're speaking the truth, and you have been through an experience. You've been through the fire,
Oh
and
yeah.
that matters. That's a
Oh, sure.
huge element of trust, without a doubt.
Right. And the other thing I do have to say, that was one episode, but then later on, when my son went away to college, I had a 2-year bout with depression myself, and feeling not with a plan of suicide, but just wanting to not live. So I had to personally dig myself out of the hole of waking up every day saying, oh, did I wake up again? And that I had to learn how to do that for myself. So I don't minimize, that's why I don't minimize depression, because I know how it's a trap and you can't get out of it. Many times you can't get out of it yourself. It's
Yeah.
it's insidious.
So speaking of traps, I know I've worked with attorneys for years as well, and all different types of business owners. And it doesn't matter what level of education you have. A lot of us, almost all of us at times, fall into the trap of focusing and working in our business versus on our business.
Mhm.
So as you're working with some of these practices, how do you help them to become more organized so that they can understand how to take time to practice as well as to plan?
Well, again, we go back to the beginning, which is we start off with a plan. The first part of the plan is plan your day. You've got to get ahead of your practice. You have to plan your day the night before. You have to plan your week on the weekend before, or either Friday before you end your week. And the year, for each year, you have to plan. Now, the part that I help my clients with is that I hold them accountable. How many of us make plans that we don't keep? So my clients, now they're accountable. Not only do they make a plan, they're accountable for the plan. So it would be like me saying to you, okay, we said you were going to do 1, 2, 3 yesterday. What did you do? How much of it did you accomplish? And then if you didn't accomplish, what happened? What happened that you got off track that you didn't do that? And what do we need to do for you to not have that happen again? So literally, my clients, it's like, I know their practices. They tell me their practices. I don't know, for confidentiality. I mean, they don't say, okay, I got John Smith with this. They'll say, I have a case that's dealing with a nursing home, or I have a case that's dealing with a hotel, or I have a case that's dealing with, breach of trust or whatever. But I know what's on their desk, just like they know what's on their desk. And I'm holding them like, wait a minute, you got a deadline here. I literally, my clients, we keep a sheet, and we're both looking at the sheet together so that I keep them organized. Most lawyers, or a high percentage of lawyers, I'm gonna say all, have ADHD. And I've had ADHD, so I know exactly. It's how your brain works. It's not like a flaw. It's how your brain works. So you have to figure out, okay, if you have ADHD, how can we keep this ADHD mind organized? Or I have clients that have OCD who get over here in the weeds over here. So what is the formula for that? So there's a lot of, what can I say? There's not a one size fits all. It's looking at, okay, who are you? What are your obstacles? Where are your blind spots? And what is the plan we need to design that will work for you? And how much accountability do you need in order to stay organized?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know when I'm coaching, I often refer to it as being a coach and being a trainer. The coach makes you aware of things, but the trainer also holds you accountable, because often I will get clients who come in and have just an eye-opening couple of sessions and then go, good, I'm good. I'm good. And then I remind them, this won't change, because we really, all three of us, we're really in the behavior business. We really are. It's changing the way that people do certain things, whether it is organizational skills and reducing stress and increasing productivity, or in my case, it's getting over that imposter syndrome and being able to deal with the fear and be more clear. And for you, Glenn, it's going about the right practices to be able to not only attract clients, but also get them to see you as a trusted advisor and understand the methodologies that you've developed. So I just brought up an interesting term that Glenn had mentioned to me in the pre-roll, and that is, we were talking about imposter syndrome. And I know that this is a term that you, Pamela, are familiar with, working with your clients, because it's a term that we're all familiar with. So what has been your experience with helping people overcome the challenges that lead to the feeling of imposter syndrome?
Well, you can't think your way out of imposter syndrome, because, basically feeling like you're an imposter is our thoughts. And they're thoughts that, unfortunately people believe their thoughts, although we have 6 to 7,000 thoughts a day, but they will pick one, like I'm a failure, I'm an imposter or whatever, and believe those thoughts. So, when you're dealing with, that I think I'm an imposter, it's really, they have to act their way out of that. So doing things outside of their comfort zone and then taking those actions, which I help them to be accountable for. And then on the other side, it's like, oh, I did that. I have a client in there, they were pretty much frozen in their law practice and not making the numbers till now they're going to be the managing partner of the firm. Well, how did they get from feeling an imposter and can't do anything to being now running a pretty substantial firm? Was action by action by action by action. And then looking back and say, wow, I did all that. Okay, maybe I am okay. Maybe I don't have to believe those thoughts about the fact that I'm an imposter.
Okay, I want to bring up one quick topic, and I'm throwing this at both of you, and that is the idea we are talking about productivity and organization and starting off your day the right way, and how the first moments lead to the first minutes, to the hours, days, months, years. Okay, what about the idea, and we were just talking, Pamela, about taking action. Sometimes the combination of those two ideas, they can freeze people in place in terms of taking the perfect action that will lead to the next action. But what about the concept of imperfect action? Does that have a place as opposed to choosing inaction? What are your thoughts? Glenn, what first comes to mind for you?
When you're dealing with perfectionists, 100%. Because the perfectionist is going to wait and tweak it, wait and tweak it, and wait and tweak it. So even if you're dealing with an attorney, a practice like Pamela's talked about, if it's their marketing, if it's their relationships with their subordinates and stuff like this, if they're waiting for it to be perfect, they're going to pass opportunities that they could have done that's going to get them to another level by taking some action and getting it one step at a time. Because as Pamela mentioned right there, it took us a while to get to here. We're not going to change it overnight. It's going to take some steps and some identification and realization to change that thought process, to change that behavior. So I'm a big fan of constant imperfect action to get those steps to acknowledge that you're getting to where you want to go.
Is that a part of the process for you, Pamela? What are your thoughts on imperfect action?
Well, I think you have to take action. I think all action is imperfect because there's really, when you do something, there's no guarantee how it's going to turn out. So I just really call it fail forward. Just take that, you fall forward, you brush yourself off and then you do it again. So it's really about staying in action, staying in action and not sitting on the side of the curb thinking. Because, if we think about thinking has gotten them or us, and even us, in a particular result. So if you keep thinking, that's the thinker, what's between the ears is going to always give you the same results. So it's only getting outside these things between our ears, taking the action, and then being able to look in hindsight. Then in hindsight, we say, wow, that was a great action. That was a great step. Or, oh, that sucked. That hurt. I don't like that action. I don't like that result. That's a fast way to course correct. And then you do it again. And so that's why having a coach, it's just like, if you take someone who's an Olympic ice skater and they're working all these years with their coach and they're doing tours jetés on the ice and they're doing all these fancy things. And then their mind, when they're standing on the side, like, I couldn't possibly do that. But then they go out there and then they fall and they get up and then they fall. But the coach is there and say, hey, you need to do more lift. You're dragging your right leg. You're going too fast. So when you have a coach, that's the benefit of taking imperfect action, because you get up faster, you keep moving faster, and you course correct faster.
And don't you find it's easier that when you have the coach that you can be the Thomas Edison and say, I didn't fail. I just learned yet another way not to do it properly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that.
Good stuff.
Yes.
Really, really good stuff. So, all right. Any other questions that you have right now, Glenn?
Well, I would like to, if we could dive in just a wee bit into the organization, because I know for myself, I will, and I look at my career kind of like you would maybe a trial attorney. It's kind of hard to have this exact schedule if you're maybe a bankruptcy attorney, social security attorney, where everything is in your office. It's a lot easier to stay organized. But when you have that trial that comes up and you have to go off over here, or you think you're going to have a trial and all of a sudden it's canceled at the last minute and now you have time on your hands, how do you help people be more organized when they have a constant inconsistency with their time schedule based on you don't know if you're going to be in court for 1 hour or 6 hours or 1 day or 1 week, to be able to flex back and forth, take a moment to breathe, and to refocus on what needs to be done in the tasks at hand?
Okay, that's a very good question, Glenn. And so the first thing if I can just veer a little bit to the back, I know I don't always exactly answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
When usually when a client comes to me, they have all these cases. They have, they may be working on their own cases. They may be working on cases other people gave them or whatever. And there are so many cases on their desk, they don't even know what the heck's on their desk. And they're only responding to fires. They're putting out fires. So the first thing we do, I do, as I have my clients do, is we need to know everything that's on your desk. You need to go in on a Saturday or a Sunday or whatever, and you need to go through every file that's on your desk. Look in the file. What are the next steps on that file? And then what is the priority that is? So you now have a master. You got to know what's on your desk, because otherwise you're at the effect of your desk. So once they have a good knowledge of what's on their desk, then they kind of, oh my God, this is due tomorrow. So then they're able to now, because the law is a deadline driven profession. So, these are the things that are due. Sometimes it's like, I can't possibly do all these things. Can I get an associate or a paralegal to help me to organize or to get these things done? So now you can start doing delegation. Delegation is very, very pivotal for lawyers. And I really encourage most of my clients to get their paralegals up and running and billing so that they can be taking some of the load. I try to get my clients to stop being worker bees, which is the billable hours, but to try to find ways to have, help that's now doing some of the billing for you, so you're not having to account for every minute. Now, with regard to, I had a case this week, a client, they weren't sure whether they were going to have a depot or on this day, or whether they had put it before the judge. Can we, get a delay on this or whatever? So a lot of those things are moving places. So the lawyer, in the case of my clients, they have their caseload. It might be 10 or 12 different things based on priority on this sheet, on the spreadsheet. It's a Google sheet, and we can share it. So we look at, okay, now if I have this, now, usually they have more than 1 or 2 things due that are impossible to even do all of the work, to tell you the truth. But, okay, if this happens, then I drop down to this one. So now they have an ongoing list of, based on priorities, of what is the next thing to do. It's not like they have one thing. Okay, if this court case is canceled or postponed until next 2 weeks, then let's bring this one up because this is due in 2 days. So it's an ongoing, it's like a living and breathing organism, a law practice is. And you have to have the whole picture instead of just like tunnel vision of, oh, I got to do this deposition, or I have to do this discovery, or I have to do this report. It has to be a living and breathing organism in order to stay organized. Is that
so? Yes, that's great. I mean, so basically, as I talk to people all across many industries, as we're talking about things like this, and I hear them talking to me and asking questions. So when we're organized, we're proactive versus reactive. When we have systems in place so that we're getting paid for other people's hours instead of our hours, it's amazing how much more productive, how much more our earning power increases just by being organized and having systems.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, over the years, in the times when I've worked with some trial attorneys, there was always a discussion about just law in general being a little reluctant to digitally transform. Is that still a challenge to work with changing everything over or using all of the digital tools that are there? Does that obviously it helps all of us be more organized? Is there still any kind of a reluctance, or has the law profession in general gotten up to speed?
Yeah. The legal profession is probably one of the slowest professions to want to change. They're really, behind the times with regard to technology, usage of case management tools. I have like clients who are like millennials and they're like, have everything digital. And then I have boomer clients that are still using notebooks for everything. So let me get this notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to change them. You're not going to get them. You're not going to pry that notebook out of their hand. So, you have large law firms and you have the governing body of those firms are primarily boomers, and boomers are there. In fact, my book is being published this month, which is, if I can think of the title, Thriving in a Multi-Generational Law Firms. And what it talks about is the difference between the millennials and the Gen X and the boomers. And and even with the pandemic, it's even more of an issue because now more Gen X and baby boomers, and millennials say, well, let's work remotely. Why do we need to be in the office? So the legal profession over the decades have prided themselves in having a particular law firm culture that is based on tradition. And so slowly but surely, they are coming up to speed. And it'll be a while, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. Amen.
So
Well,
you're talking about, just for a moment, one more quick topic, Glenn, and I know this is probably a question that would take a whole nother episode to answer, Pamela. So I'm going to ask for the short answer from you. And that is, you talk about multi-generational law firms thriving. A lot of that has to do with communication, recognizing communication styles, not just generationally, but also in peer-to-peer generations, the different ways that people communicate. Is there, do you touch on that just a little bit with your clients? You spoke a little bit about individuals who are more of a bully tactic or what we call an aggressive communication style. Do you touch on the others as well, even just a handful of them?
Well, we talk about it in the book, and what we say is that the legal profession has prided themselves on IQ. The value of a lawyer is based on their intelligence and how much knowledge they have, but they're like very low on the EQ. So the EQ is where the relationship building and the communicating and more compassion and those sorts of things. And we talk about that in depth in our book, actually, because the legal profession, it's like, has been so based on tradition and stiff upper lip and all of that, and working and kind of in many ways like a military culture.
Yeah.
And now, the Gen X, especially, and the millennials are saying, we're not interested in that. We're not going to do that. And so the turnover, the law firms are spending billions of dollars on turnover because the millennials aren't having it. And now with COVID, it's even more so. So, really the lawyers are going to have to focus more in educational, like the educational development in law firms are going to have to focus on EQ in the communication in order to smooth out these rough edges that are having the law firms be in some ways in turmoil.
All right.
Great.
Well, our time has gone by today. Pamela, if anyone would want to reach out to you, what's the easiest way to contact you?
Okay. You can reach me at Pamela at PamelaDeNeuve.com. And I'm going to spell my last name. So it's Pamela, P-A-M like Mary, E-L like Lucy, A, Pamela, at Pamela again. And then my last name is spelled D like David, E, N like Nancy, E, U, V like Victor, E, Pamela DeNeuve.
Awesome.
.com.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It was a great week.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pamela. We really appreciate you taking time out of your travels and giving us a glimpse into where you are there in Spain, but even more so, everything you have to give to individuals who want to reduce stress and improve their productivity. Fantastic. Thank you.
Well, glad. Thank you. I'm honored to have you and wonderful to meet both of you. Well, Craig, I mean, I knew you, but Glenn, yeah.
All right. All right, everyone. Have a great holiday. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll talk to everyone soon.